Hello, everyone. Are we ready? Okay. I call the Select Board meeting to order tonight, August 1st, Tuesday, August 1st at 7:06 p.m. A motion to open the meeting? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I think we have to do a roll call because Joe McCrisky is online. So, Vice Chair Cavey?
Aye.
Mr. Gito? Mr. McCrisky?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And for roll call, Vice Chair Cavey?
Present.
Mr. Gito? Mr. McCrisky?
I am here.
Mr. Carrera is out due to illness, but I am here. I would ask that you stand so we can salute our flag if you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with Governor Baker's declaration of June 16, 2021, granting certain pandemic-related authorizations related to public board and town meetings, and recently extended until March 31st, 2025, this meeting will be conducted both in person and virtually via Google Meets. The meeting will be recorded by SMAC, cable television, and broadcast live and may be live streamed at www.stoughtontv.org. A recording of the meeting, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the meeting will be posted on the town's website and or SMAC as soon as possible after the meeting if the live broadcast or live streaming is unsuccessful. Times are approximate and items may be taken out of order at the chairperson's discretion. So thank you everyone for attending tonight's second planning retreat. As you may recall, our first planning retreat, which was Tuesday, July 18th, we talked about items that we must do and timely do them throughout our fiscal year and calendar year. We talked about our achievements as well. And then we had a brainstorming session on what we thought our objectives should be for this current fiscal year and upcoming fiscal year. And there was about 17 items on that list. And that's one of the handouts that you received tonight. So first, let's just, for the audience's sake, let's review the items, the 17 items. Number 1, policy manual. 2, town-wide beautification, more than just trash. 3, town infrastructure, existing and public infrastructure, including parking. 4, stabilization fund. 5, employee morale and team building. 6, staffing for the entire town, civil service, recruiting, competitive salaries. 7, water meters. 8, beautification, that's town-owned land, community organizations, and putting out plants. And number 9 is senior housing, property owners to sell, town to build housing, expedited permitting, priority site/location. 10, cultural center downtown, depot, don't rule out other sites. 11, communication transparency. 12, accomplish all of Tom's items on his list. 13, economic development plan that we can act on. 14, fiscal management, strengthen our balance sheet. 15, police department relocation, plan for it. 16, minority-owned business set-asides, and 17, centralized purchasing. So from this list of 17, if you have a pen handy, what we would like to do is kind of identify what departments are impacted by these 17 items. And then from there, you'll go back into your groups, which you're sitting now, but we can narrow this list of 17 down to the top 3 goals. That is our objective for tonight. Identify our top 3 goals and what are our top 3 challenges. And from our challenges, how can the select board be of help? So let's get to it. So number 1, for policy manual, so I'll have a pen at my fingertips. If someone could be a scribe for me, and it doesn't matter who would do that, but just the first one, I have a list. As I recalled, I was working with Jill to put down all of the department names, and we can see which departments would be unfairly impacted. Oh, you want to do that? Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, just on this piece of paper, since we don't have it electronic anymore, just kind of write what departments would be impacted. Okay. Thank you for volunteering, though. So the first one was, so I don't have the list. You want to shout it out, and then, oh, okay. You want to, okay. So the first one is the policy manual. What departments are impacted by that? All of them, right? Okay. Number 2.
Oh, it would be all except police and fire. They have their own unique policy manuals that relate to police and fire. Right, is that fair?
Yeah, but I think that townwide policy, where it comes into a relationship, anything that has to do with the town, or, let's say the process of finance, right?
If that's the case, that
You
would
want to use a microphone just so we want to hear what everyone has to say because it is valuable.
make an argument that it's small. I agree.
Yeah, I was just saying that although we do have policies and procedures in place, when we cross over to town business, whether it's ambulance revenue, turnovers, or anything else that falls under the purview of town hall, we would have to follow those policies. So I think it would affect us in a way like that.
I would agree.
All righty. The next is town-wide beautification. More than just trash. What departments? You want to use your mic?
Certainly, Public Works would be at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Any other departments? Want to use a mic? Mm-hmm.
And it affects economic development. That's why we have the beautification committee, because it's the image of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, I would argue that it's all again. And
It's
I'll
all
tell you
again?
why. In the private sector, we like to say, how many of you don't think you impact business, the customer?
Mm-hmm.
And the receptionists inevitably raise their hand and say, well, I don't sell, I'm not in operations, I don't sell. Yet nobody impacts business more than the lady or gentleman that answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that if you're an employee of the town in any one of these departments, police, fire, veterans, procurement, doesn't matter. If you see something, say something. So it involves every department. If you drive in and you live in Middleborough and you work in the assessor's office and you see a mattress on the side of the road, I would hope and expect that that employee would call the inspector for the rubbish department and report it. So I would suggest that involves all employees in every department.
Okay.
I was actually going to say the same thing. I think it affects all departments and team morale. When you take pride in the place that you work, if it looks like a dump, you'll treat it like a dump. So beautification, I think, brings everybody's spirits up, and you want to protect it. The better it looks, the more you want to protect it.
Okay. Well, so we don't go down the rabbit hole that for every item we say every department. How about we say directly impacted versus indirectly impacted? So what departments are directly impacted by the items? So I think that might narrow it down a little bit, because where I'm going with this is if we get to the point of having our top 3 goals and then we have our top 3 challenges if there's no other way to filter out, well, one department is being overly burdened when compared to another department. So this is the reason we're going through this exercise.
So, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to stimulate some discussion on this.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing at all.
Okay.
I just want to be clear. We're going to have the same discussion on finance and administration. It is one person's department. It is all of our responsibility if we're going to achieve the goal. I love the process, but as I look at it, townwide beautification, if you work in this town, it's got to be one of your priorities, whether you live here or not. And so although it's DPW's primary responsibility, it's all of our responsibilities, and if it's not, that's a major challenge.
You're so right
Just like
with
in
your
finance. If we think it's just Bill's responsibility, but nobody else's, that's our major challenge. Is that people only think it's Bill's responsibility because it's finance. So it's an interesting discussion, I think.
Right. It's very interesting because, well, it's not that I would dispute what you're saying because I'm actually agreeing, but if we look at all of the items are first challenge financing, how we're going to pay for it, whatever we want to do, how we're going to pay, what's the funding source. So then I would step to the side and say, well, it's up to the town manager to find funding for our items. Ha ha. But so we're going to have fun with this, and we're going to be serious. So we're going to bang through some of these items. Oh, Vice Chair Cavey and the planner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be helpful to make a distinction between responsibility and accountability, and the distinction would be essentially that for many of these tasks, all of us have some sort of responsibility, some component of it over which we ought to act. Whereas there are certain things that we actually hold people accountable for certain activities happening or not happening, and those really have a much more sort of limited and focused within certain departments. And so even though something like beautification, trash pickup, we all hold in reality some responsibility to make sure it's happening. The fact is that there are certain people who we hold accountable for actually completing any sort of project we say we want to have done, and they're going to ultimately be accountable for those projects, those happening. So I think as we go through this, it might be helpful to distinguish between those two different areas.
That differentiation is very helpful, so I agree with you, Mr. Coulter, and Vice Chair Cavey. Yes, planner.
I take it in the accountability, it's always implementation, because I look at some of this. So if the townwide beautification, and not really just taking it away from the trash, like I know that several councilors have talked about, we're thinking about introducing pocket parks and those sorts of things, and implementing that. It's, DPW implements the physical portion of it. Development services through planning, building, engineering, our GIS. We're identifying this concept of pocket parks. We're identifying the town land, then engineering myself, we're evaluating it, and then working, implementing is some of the accountability. So like that, I think for townwide beautification, DPW, engineering, building, development services is planning, engineering, building. That's really a lot of it is, we're the ones that will look at directly working on impact and implementing it.
Thank you very much.
I guess our accountability.
Accountability. Oh yes, Mr. Gito.
I guess following on with that, is this on?
The green light is, but I can barely hear you. How? Testing.
Oh, it is, okay. Following on with this discussion, it seems to me that we need to basically have what I would call a vision for each of these things. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but that's what I would use, basically to say, what are we planning to accomplish here? And then who's going to do what, and when? I mean, these are just broad categories, and it seems to me that all of them are important. But when you look at the workforce and you look at the money, then you need to get down to what's going to happen between now and July or June 30th of 2024. And how do we report back to the citizens of the town that we have accomplished or how much we have accomplished? So maybe we can go through this list, but it seems to me that that there has to be an awful lot more below this that perhaps the town manager, the department heads can begin to flesh out, and then we could go from there. But let me just stop.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. Mr. McCrisky had his hand raised before, and then Mr. Coulter. Yes, Mr. McCrisky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would add to that as well, zoning enforcement, as the town manager has spoken recently, of having zoning enforcement, the police department, and then another position on somebody at the Department of Public Works that is going to be vested to go out and do the enforcement and to do follow-up. So on those departments there'd be some impact on us as well.
That is true. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Mr. Coulter.
Madam Chair, I think it may be helpful for the process, because I think all of the comments in the last 20 minutes are right on.
Yes.
There's no question they're right on, but I think it may be helpful, and the staff can support this or not. The reason this staff achieved 18 of its 20 major objectives for last year is there's a very effective process we use called action planning. So once we agreed on what the objectives were, we go through a specific set of action steps that we agreed to take in order to achieve that objective. And that is the back end of the process once we decide what the objectives are. Now, I submitted objectives for next year, and that's what we're talking about here. There will be an action plan for each one of those objectives very, very soon, this month. And if we don't set an action plan, it's nothing more than a New Year's Eve goal. The action step is the substance behind how we get from a goal to an achievement. And they're very specific. It includes the action step, who's going to do it, and when it'll be completed by. As Lou knows, we did that for solid waste. We had a detailed action plan for steps that had to be accomplished, who was going to do it, when it would be done by. And lo and behold, we met the objective. So I think what you've outlined is very helpful here. What we're trying to determine actually is what the staff believes are the top 3 priorities, the top 3 priority objectives, and then have an open discussion on what are the challenges associated with accomplishing those objectives. From that discussion, staff will develop a detailed action step to present to the board for every one of those objectives. But I'd be very curious to know what the staff, and I know you are, you said it to me, would be very curious to know what the staff sees as, to me, all 20 that I submitted are major priorities, and all 20 will be achieved. We've got an extraordinary staff here. The question is which ones they think are the top priorities, and once that's established, what are the barriers getting in the way of accomplishing that? I think it's important to know that we do have an action plan process that whatever this group decides, whatever the board decides, is the plan we'll follow to make sure we achieve every one of them.
It's right on. Thank you very much, Mr.
Now your mic's not working.
It's not working? Testing, testing.
Now it is.
Okay. The speakers. Okay, next is town infrastructure. Existing and public infrastructure, including parking. Departments that will be held accountable. Yes.
That again would be Public Works, heavily involved in that. Water and sewer and engineering is the top three that come to my list.
And procurement.
Anyone else? Grab a mic and just shout, oh, yes, Mr. Gito. Correct, next.
I think we also need to think about what infrastructure we need in the future. We are an MBTA community, and our housing density is going to increase substantially because of that. And we need to know how we're going to be able to get around in that increased development, whether it's 5, 10, or 15 years from now. And we need to be able to determine how that's going to be done and how we are going to, the town is going to be able to have the resources to, in fact, make sure that that infrastructure pattern is developed properly, because we have a very strange infrastructure in our downtown, and not one that that really is helpful to getting around. Yet our zoning basically reflects a situation where we have a very good network, but we don't have that. So we have to either develop it or change the way we're thinking about our development. And that has to happen very soon. I would suggest that we need to begin that planning process this next year, because people are going to start to invest in the downtown, and that's going to make it more difficult for us to do the things that we might need to do. I believe I've been shut off. What we need to do, okay, enough.
Okay. Craig, did you?
I'd like to agree with Mr. Joe there.
Yes, something. Oh, and then Joe. Mm-hmm.
Parking and traffic patterns in the downtown area are very important. We've been years, trying to find, primaries for parking, where parking exists in town. Economic development was involved with the downtown parking plan, and I think that needs to continue. We need to identify where people are parking and how traffic patterns are flowing through town. MassDOT is currently investing a lot in programs for
I heard that.
we have several intersections under construction, and
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. McCrisky, it's something wrong with the sound.
I don't know how the audio is, if the public is hearing what I'm not hearing, but the audio is broken up on some of the speakers and very hard to understand.
Joe, we're experiencing the same thing here.
Okay.
That you're experiencing there. Maybe upgrading SMAC equipment should be somewhere in the top 3.
I'm just concerned, like I said, I'm not hearing everything either, and didn't know if there's anything they can do on site for that.
Well, we have, the technician is here. We have Trish in the room supporting that.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you for letting us know that you're experiencing the same thing that we are, and we're on site.
I think this mic might be a little better than that one.
It does, so it sounds a little bit better.
Maybe that one's a little faulty.
Much better.
Okay. Yeah, so in short, there's a lot of traffic projects going on in town. The Route 138 corridor project will be starting soon. MassDOT's advertising that this fall. And we are also getting underway with the Tosca Drive improvement. So there's a lot happening, and I think the downtown area should thrive because of all the improvements through the corridors around town. So, you know, finding areas to park and how to the best utilize the spaces that we have is very important.
Thank you very much. The technician just asked if we could take a brief recess so they could reboot their equipment. So we'll just take a quick recess for a couple of minutes.
Check, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, 3. Check, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Testing, testing. Okay, this is better. Joe online, how about with you?
Much better on my end, Madam Chair.
Okay. Dolores, how about you?
Yes, much
Okay.
better. Was the last speaker Mr. Jaffoon?
The last speaker was Craig, the assistant town engineer.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot my papers. Here's the- It is. It's very challenging. Great. We have so much to do. Oh, Mike was on. Oh.
It's true. Facts are friendly.
Yeah, facts are friendly. Okay, we're moving right along. We were on item number 3, town infrastructure. Any more comments about that? If not, we will move to item number 4, stabilization fund. What departments would you say are impacted? Very interesting. It takes the accounting department to monitor it. That's a direct impact. Yes.
I hesitate to speak because this is a collaborative process, but once again, I'm going to say everyone. And I can go through every single department and give examples of how we can save money that can go to the reserve account, to the stabilization account. By way of example, if we get electronic e-permitting on board, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in new revenue. If we get the second ambulance in time, that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in new revenue that can go to reserves. What was just done with solid waste, water, and sewer, is millions of dollars in new money that is earmarked for reserves. We can go right down the line and talk, Regional 911 is going to add $1 million to reserves. And every department, we're selling 30 pieces of equipment in September that were all insured, that haven't rolled in a year and a half or 2 years or 3 years. That's $200,000 in cash that is going to go to reserves. I could go to every single department and point out ways how they can impact contributions to our stabilization account.
Okay, let's keep moving to the next, number 5, employee morale and team building. Now, that's a definite impact to everyone. Number 6, staffing. If you want to make a comment or something, I will recognize you, but if not, we'll just keep moving along. Number 6, staffing for the entire town, civil service, recruiting, competitive salaries. Number 7, water meters. Number 8, we have another.
I'll take the water meter one.
Okay, yeah. Hi there.
So it's going to start with Fran and finish with me. So.
Okay.
Procurement and water department and sewer.
Number 8, beautification. Oh, Mr. Gito.
There's something I think that should be added for this year, and that is to decide how much water we can get from the Cedar Swamp wells. We need to figure that out. We could get anywhere from 300,000 gallons to about 1 million or a little bit more. But we should get that nailed down. We should also make sure that our zoning is in place in order to be able to protect that, that well field or potential well field. And we shouldn't just put that off.
So we have, I think it's very important that we add it, but is that our item number 18, or could we include it in one of the existing number 17s? So we have a water meter. I'm just looking really quick. Okay. Economic development, fiscal management, police station management. No.
Why don't we just put it as a separate one, and if later on we want to put it somewhere else, we can do that.
Yeah, someone shouted out number 3, town infrastructure. How about that? That might be a good place for it to land. Falls right there. Falls right there? Yes.
So, so in the late 80s, that was investigated, but the testing and permitting was incomplete. So, of course, that was 25, 30 years ago now. So it's more of a long-range goal. The water is there. It's going to have to be, the permitting process is going to have to be restarted, rebooted. So it's not like something we can come back next June and it's going to be done. It's going to be a 5 to 7 year process. But something definitely worth looking at if the town continues to grow and the demand continues.
Good point, good point. Number 8, another beautification, town-owned land, community organizations to support putting plants and things out to beautify the town. Okay. Did anyone say anything? I didn't hear. Okay. No one online? Number 9.
I was just going to say the Friends of Stoughton Center, their beautification committee has been working on things like that. So that's something, a group that I work with, so that's something that I continue to assist with.
Thank you.
Shouldn't that be really with 2?
2 and 8. They can be combined.
As they read, they look like the same thing. There were 2 different intentions. One was to clean up the trash, and the other was to plant flowers. So that's why it was 2 different items. But you could put them both under the same.
Okay.
Sure.
Number 9, senior housing, property owners to sell, town to build housing, expedited permitting, and priority site/location.
That's the planner, that's economic development, that's engineering and permitting, that's zoning. Probably fire, for water department, you need water, you need sewerage. So it's at least all of them. You need finance.
Need your mic.
Housing authority, finance.
Mike?
So I would also say building department, if you're looking to expedite permitting, we work hand in hand with the building department with permitting. So I think we probably have to define expediting. Also, senior housing definitely increases the use of the ambulance. So it has a prolonged effect on the fire department. Increased ambulance calls, responses, transport to the hospital. If you're looking to, if you're looking to increase the senior, I guess, population in the town, it definitely has an effect. We feel it when, you know, maybe the Arbors or these other buildings go in. They say they originally start off with a contract ambulance, which, you know, eventually runs out, and now they just rely on 911, and it really has an impact on public safety.
It would also include the assessors, the treasurer, because there is surplus property that we could develop and long-term planning. There are properties that, and businesses that haven't paid their taxes in quite a long time that are available for tax title. So it involves every one of those groups.
Anyone? All right. Number 10, cultural center for downtown.
Actually, I've been working with Paul on that already because right now it's converting the train depot into the cultural center. So he's been working on the physical aspect, and I've been trying to help get additional funding for it. So I know it involves other departments, but we're working on that right now.
Anyone else have anything on the depot culture center?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Gito.
I think we ought to define what we want in a cultural center. Whether the depot is the only place where we want a cultural center, what we want to have in it. I mean, that's a nice building, but it's not very big. And if there are 30,000 people in the town at the present time, and we're expected to have a whole lot more, then you're not going to be able to fit too many of them in there. And I think you need to know what events you want to have, what services you want to have there, and work from that. And it may be that you don't just have one place. Maybe you have to have more than one. But to define our cultural center, the only thing that we're talking about is the downtown, may not be very forward-thinking. I'm not suggesting that the train station might not be a good place to start. But maybe we ought to be thinking a little bit further than tomorrow.
Yes, Mr. Calder.
I don't want to confuse the matter, but the board has voted it's a community center, not a cultural center. We did a poll of community members, and they determined what they would like to see there for needs. And among those needs are community and cultural events. But by definition and per the vote of the board, it's a community center. And so I want to correct the record on that. It's not a cultural center. And that there will be many events there. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. The plan, the vote, the policy has been created by the board. It's a community center. And we've now got feedback from the community as to what they'd like to see at that event. They'd like to see community meetings. They'd like to see cultural events. They'd like to have it be dances. They'd like to see entertainment there. There's lots of things that they gave us feedback that they would like to see there. And that's the road we're going down, to build a community center that has multiple events there. And I agree with Lou. We're a big town. That's a small facility. There can only be very limited events there. But you can have Boy Scout meeting, Girl Scout meeting, Little League meetings, football meetings that we don't have space around town to provide. So it'll be designed and built as a multi-purpose community center. And then we should look at a true cultural center. If you go to some of the surrounding towns that have cultural centers, they're as big as our library, and they host first-class cultural events there. Stoughton is deserving of that type of cultural center. This is a local meeting place, a local community center.
Thank you, Mr. Culture. Mr. McCrisky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the town manager for bringing that up, because we did vote, and we're well on our way to doing that. A lot of work that needs to be done. Working with Paul, we've got the electricity on. We'll have water soon, and then we'll try to get the boiler going. But there remains, and the town manager spoke recently, there's a lot of money that needs to be raised to get that building going. But there might be things we can do there. The list is endless. As I did mention several times, we have like 90 different things that we can do in that building. But again, before we can do that, we need to have working restrooms that have to be built to code. We need to, as we all know, we got money from the CPC to secure the windows, because the plexiglass that's there is, you basically can't see through it. So there's a lot of repairs we have to do, and we're working towards that. And I know the economic development officer has been working on getting grants, which is helpful. And I think we're going to have to start to do some fundraisers, maybe get the help of a nonprofit to help us do that, or start something, a nonprofit that would work with the town. So there's a lot there, and I just don't want to see us back up that we're, saying it's something different. The board did vote for, for community center, and I think with the broader scope of a community center, we're going to be able to include a lot of things, events, people, groups, which is what it should be. Couldn't ask for a better location. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. Moving to item number, where are we? Number 11, communication and transparency. Any comments? Oh, yes. Yes, Trish. Mm-hmm.
I'll speak to that. I think we need to do a better job, every single department. We might have the tools in place for getting the communication out, but we have to get the information through the tools to the community. So I think we get better and better. Without babysitting, some of it requires probably training and more tools and more feedback. So I feel like we're on that path. And we're there, but it takes every department. So again, I'd love you to look at your website. Is it useful to the average citizen? Does it help them? Can you put more stuff on Facebook? Are you putting all of your items in the crier? How are you getting your word out? We do have, and this is, Tom is really big on transparency. But we also have, our plan is to get a board like the Public Works does out in front of Town Hall. So I think that'll be helpful for those who aren't on social media. We have a big TV downstairs in the lobby. I've heard a lot of feedback on that. So as customers are coming in, citizens are coming in to pay their bills, they'll look at the screen. So I think we have, like I said, I think we have good tools in place. We have to educate people, and the department heads, you have to take ownership for getting your word out to the citizens. What do they want to know about what you're doing? And I can help you with the tools that we have, but it's only going to be as good as the information you give me. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's very important. Yes, Vice Chair Cavey.
Thanks. Communications has been something that we struggle with at times, but I think this is much more universal in the current era. When I grew up in the teenager in the 90s, so it wasn't that long ago. But if a friend wanted to get in touch with me, they had 3 ways to do it. They could show up at my house, give me a call, or send me a letter, and that was it. There was no other way to communicate, and that's on a personal, person to person. That is not at all the case anymore. And I have at least a dozen different ways that people communicate with me, and there's no necessarily rhyme or reason as to why one person picks one versus the other, whether they send a message through Facebook, or they send me an email, or they call, or they communicate through our website. Any of these are ways that people can communicate now. Mm-hmm. And so we end up with a situation where our means of communication are diluted. And if you pick the couple of things that you want to do, you will likely only honestly get your message to a handful of people. Right? It's frustrating to I know me as I try to communicate with people, because unless I send the same message 16 different ways, I have no real way to be sure whether or not the person I'm sending messages to is going to receive it. Sometimes they don't like to use text. Sometimes they don't have email, or they don't get the paper. And so that's what we're struggling with. We're struggling in an environment where communication is, even though we have more ways of communicating than we've ever had in the history of mankind, that's actually diluted our ability to really successfully transmit a message to other people. How exactly we address that is uncertain. I think we do have to be agile about it, in the sense that we need to sort of constantly experiment with new ways of doing it, and rather than just the shotgun effect of just sending messages out every possible way you can imagine, it may be helpful to pick a handful, a couple of ways that people communicate, and try those, and see what works, see what doesn't work, try something else, and be very deliberate about the approaches that you take, the time frame in which you're going to sort of collect some data, come back, analyze it, try to come up with a new plan, because communication is really key. And I know everybody here is intimately aware of how important it is to communicate, and everyone here, I have faith, does everything they possibly can to communicate to the people they need to communicate with. And yet I feel like we're all kind of frustrated by the fact that no matter how hard you try, it seems like you're always missing, most people. And that's the feedback we get. People will show up to meetings saying, I didn't know we were even talking about this, after we've been discussing it one way or another and communicating about it for sometimes months. And it's not their fault, it's not our fault, but we're not bridging that gap. I think this is pretty universal. I think everyone's dealing with it, and I don't have a solution. But I think what we need to do is be very experimental and very deliberate about our experimentations and seeing what works and doesn't work, and just keep on trying. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cavey. Mr. Calder.
Well, first of all, I want to just completely agree with the last 2 speakers. We've got the tools, we've got the intent. I guess I'm saying what I'm about to say to the public. We've got something most communities don't have, and that is a policy board, the select board, that have given myself and all department heads explicit instructions to communicate information to the community. Hold nothing back. If it's true, if it's factual, tell the world about it. That makes our job much easier. We don't have to filter everything to make sure it's politically acceptable. So I first of all want to commend the board for that policy and for that freedom to speak openly. I will say, however, and we say it at every meeting, we don't have a centralized public relations department. So to Tricia's point, it comes down to every department head talking about the great work that you're doing, because you are doing great work. It's not selling it, it's telling the story of the great work, the services we provide, whether it's the library or veterans or police or fire. It's every project we're working on. It's every single department. By way of example, as most of you know, as the town knows, I put out a release on Friday about the water situation that's occurred over the past year. I didn't have to get permission to do that. As long as it was made up of facts, the board has given us carte blanche to release it without approval. You don't get that in many communities. That's a commitment to communication and transparency. But we have to use the tools that Trish has created to make sure that we're telling the story about our services, about the challenges we're having, about our plans for the future, whether it's underground, whether it's surfacing roads. That's all great stuff. That's a community that's on the move, where things are happening. And we should tell everybody about that. And I know Trish is frustrated, I'm frustrated, and that's why I would put in this category all. Because everybody, every department head is doing great work.
Yes.
And they should talk about it. I know Lou has an issue with this, that we just, it's, you know, there's content and then there's the mechanism, the means of, the medium of communication. When you're doing the type of work that you folks are doing, what Paul's doing right now in the DPW, and so many of you are doing, Mike is doing, you're all doing it, veterans every day. Why aren't we talking about it? We've got a great organization.
Yes. Yes, Chief.
Yeah, so one of the most difficult things with all this platforms is how do you? And it's really become a science. We've actually made a PIO officer, public information officer, and maybe that's where the town starts to go. It has to be a one-point contact to kind of, you know, filter out the misinformation and can gather all the department's information on what they believe is the pertinent stuff. And it's really become a legality. We, in the fire service, we send them to PIO classes. Where can you speak to? What do you have to stay away from? How do you get your information out? I even just learned today in working with, you know, if I post something to Facebook, it doesn't go to Instagram, but if I go post it on Instagram, it goes to Facebook. So, right. So this is the stuff that, you know, I have no idea of. I think if I post it on Facebook, maybe it's being picked up, but it's really not all the time. And where does the town go for its information, right? I think the working group with the fire station project can attest to the fact that there was a lot of, I never knew, I didn't hear this, you know, and we had hit what we thought was every single platform, whether it was print, social media, YouTube, on Smack, everything, and we still had a number of people saying they never knew anything about it. It made us look. We don't have the penny saver anymore. We don't have just the enterprise. It's really become a full-time job. So maybe this town looks at something as media relations, as the town manager said, or some sort of public information officer to assist and is knowledgeable about this. I don't.
Good points.
Yeah.
Good points.
The schools do have a public information officer, just for our information.
Vice Chair Cavey.
So two things. First, I wouldn't, I'll say two things first. I don't have a role in operations, and I'm not going to pretend to, so this is really just a suggestion. And also, I wouldn't share this unless it was a conversation I'd already had. But, we do have, an absolutely excellent set of professionals who dedicate their lives to sharing information in this town. It's within our public education, it's within our public library system. And they, have a unique set of talents to be able to provide this sort of resource to the community. There might be, certainly there are areas that they would not necessarily have the infrastructure right now for. And this isn't me telling anybody to take on a task. However, I do believe that, leveraging the talents that we already have within the public libraries might be a really excellent way to sort of channel this task to a group of professionals who have the talent to deal with it. And I'm, as I said, not telling you what to do.
But Mr. McGee, Chris, do you have a comment, or how about that? What do you think?
I have talked a little bit with Mr. Kevy about this before, and I think with yourself, but it's just we have a population that comes to the library that you don't see everywhere, and so we do touch a significant portion of the Stoughton population. Some of these folks who say they don't see things and they don't know things, so maybe we could just do a better job of using the staff of the library, but also the library building itself, so we can reconfigure some things, try to get some of that screen in like you have here, so that we can just put it in the face of folks a little bit more. So it's mainly just thinking about the library when we're talking about communication as one of those tools.
Right. Yeah. Does anyone online have a comment about that? You want to add something? All righty. Let's go to the next, which is number 12. Accomplish all on Tom's list. That's Tom Coulter's list. That would be all. Number 13, economic development plan that we can act on.
So everybody might not be aware, but during the master plan process, 2 economic development plans were developed. So we do have the economic development master plan for Stoughton that's town-wide, and we also have the economic development master plan just for downtown Stoughton, and they're actually on the planning board website along with the master plan. I'm sure this is another discussion, but people know the master plan's getting kind of old, so I think that's part of that process, that the economic development portion also does need to be updated. But in the meantime, I'm working with the town manager to go over objectives and things that we want to accomplish now, rather than wait a couple of years until we have the master plan updated. But we do have something in place that that I and other staff have been following for years.
Thank you. Mr. Coulter.
So Pam just made my day. She really did. We can be in the internal planning process, and that's Bill's job, right? To develop a 3, 4, 5, 6-year plan. When we think about economic development, because of the leadership of Mr. Cavey, we've got a very solid plan for a very large senior living facility. That's economic development. They pay taxes. But what Pam and I are working on with Mr. Tisdale is to figure out 3 major problems that have gone decades without being resolved. The hole in the ground in the center of town, the dilapidated old theater that's closed, that is a barrier to us developing downtown until that's fixed, and it's the rail station, making it a very viable, vibrant place to go meet. Our goal for this year in the objectives I set are come up with an action plan that'll get those things moving this year as Bill is working on a long-term vision for the town. As long as we keep thinking about a grand long-term plan, it seems year after year after year after year after year, we make little progress. There are small bites of that large grand plan, like filling in the hole in the ground in the center of town, and either demoing or remodeling that theater that can have a profound impact on toward unleashing more economic development. But until we fix those things that are obvious blights in the center of our town, Bill, would you agree, it's very difficult to develop excitement about a long-term plan?
I wholeheartedly agree. And I also do day-to-day implementation, by the way.
Didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I'm sorry.
Okay, moving right along, we're doing a time check. It's 8:06 p.m. So items number 14 is fiscal manage, strengthen our balance sheet. Any comments on that? We know who that's impacting primarily. Number 15, police department relocation, plan for it. Okay. Number 16 is minority-owned business set-asides. That's part of economic development as well. And, oh, I'm sorry.
I have a probably less than popular question on that one. I don't remember that one coming up or being part of the selection of 21 options that we were given.
It was.
It was on the that page. I
It was
remember
this
seeing
table that came up with that.
I was just curious. I mean, I work really, really hard at Cedar Hill to make sure that we have, we're transparent, inclusive, equal. To set us up, first off, what would define a minority? Everyone's from somewhere else, but wouldn't that be less than equal to have something set aside for a particular race, gender, or ethnic background, sexual orientation, to not include anybody and everybody?
So you want to add that? Because
sorry,
I would have said to level the playing field, but Mr.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be disrespectful by any means.
Not.
It just
we're,
doesn't.
We're talking. We're all.
I just wasn't sure if it was legal.
It's an honest question, Victor, and we respect you for asking it. Our community is 30% people of color, and it's important to all of us in this administration that we represent in all we say and do the population of this community that we represent. I come from a community that is less than 0.5% of minority status or people of color, and it's not a priority there, and I'm ashamed of that. We do represent 30% of our citizens. We serve 30% of our citizens. By me answering the question, I don't want to make you feel bad for asking it. I appreciate you asking it. I think it's a question others think and don't always ask. I think we not only have a duty to support a minority community in many ways. I find it, the last 2 people we've hired at Town Hall are outstanding employees, and they're people of color. And that's something, as a staff, we're very proud of. And it's worked out beautifully. And they weren't given any favoritism. We just reached out to that community, and some very bright people applied. A community that we wouldn't have even have thought to recruit from.
No, fair enough. And I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. When someone walks through the door, everybody's a person. I don't care what color you are. It was just a matter of, if we have, the way it sounds to me is if you have 10 licenses to give out, 20 people apply, but only, I don't know how many are going to be set aside, but if not enough people apply that are minority, does that mean everybody, what's defined as a minority? I know we're 30% Portuguese. I know that there's a big community here, absolutely. But whoever lives in this town is who we serve, and to deny somebody based upon them not being defined as
See, that's
a
the problem, if I may, Victor, before we go too far on this. That's the problem with having a single phrase to define an objective. Nobody's talking about alienating or excluding anyone.
Okay.
It's just a matter of being more inclusive because of who we are and what we stand for.
Right.
We were at this table, and just for the record, this wasn't Deborah's idea. This was my idea.
Well, that's, are we being...
It's just who we are and who we need to be, given the population that we have the privilege of serving.
Oh, no problem. I didn't know if we were
That's
being...
the problem with a short phrase.
Yeah.
It doesn't explain the entire objective or the entire intent.
That's more what it is. I just didn't understand
Fair
it,
enough.
and just making sure that we were... I wasn't sure that if we were currently being defined as non-inclusive. That's all. I just thought we were serving the whole community. That's all.
And I'm glad you brought it up. If it was on your mind, you brought it up because we do need to. Now, this is taking a sidestep from the purpose of our meeting, our planning meeting, but we do need to normalize conversations such as this and feel comfortable talking about it.
Oh, I'm not comfortable by any means. I just got a notification that my heart rate went up by a lot. So it wasn't meant to be disrespectful by any means. It was just curious on my mind.
Madam Chair, I think there's one top priority that's not on the list that I think we need to fix right away. If the camera, the SMAC equipment makes me look fat. How do we address that? I've lost 20 pounds, and that doesn't look like it. And I can hear my wife yelling at me right now.
That camera, you look so skinny. Anything else about procurement or procurement initiatives in this area?
So, is there anyone else? Frank?
I can talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we do in procurement is we can have training for not just minority business owners, but small business owners, and we can teach them how to bid on projects, how to become a vendor on a state contract list. So there's always that training, and we can always have incentives. For instance, if we go out to bid and we issue an RFP, a request for proposal, we can give more points to those minority business-owned companies in a specific trade. So we can always incorporate that into our procurement department or procedures.
That's right. Yes, Mr. Calder.
Just to be clear, number 17 is purchasing, not procurement. And the reason I want to clarify that is we've got a procurement department that is working. It's fixed. It's not broken. We don't need to change it. We don't do anything. But with respect to purchasing, which is actually the negotiation and the buying of goods and services, I believe, Fran and I have talked about it at great length, there's at least $1 million plus in savings by having a purchasing department. So assuming we spend $80,000 to have a purchasing manager, the question is it a good investment? If we can save $1 million plus, and I say a minimum is the $1 million, it could be $2 or $3 million if it's 10% on our top 40 vendors. I know that sounds a lot private sector-like, but why should we not be able, under the procurement laws, to still purchase in a very business-like manner? So I'm not lobbying, but when I get my vote, this is going to be in the top 3, just so you know.
All right.
Because $1 million can go a long way in this community.
Yes, absolutely. So we've gone over 17 items, potentially 18 if we decide not to include, to separate out the one item that Mr. Gito mentioned. But now is the time for us to try to take all of these ideas, these list of items, and come up with our top 3. So top 3 goals based on this list, what's important to you? And let's try to justify why it is important. And then from there, we'll go to our challenges, impediments to accomplishing those top 3 goals. And then last but not least, how the select board members can help with the process. Vice Chair Cavey, did you?
Thank you very much. I was inspired to mark up one of these objective lists with a lot of different colors. I don't usually do that, but I thought this might be kind of useful because I noticed some ways of grouping these tasks based on where they where they're focused, either internally or externally to town hall, but also even within those areas, whether they were geared towards, one set of problems or another. I'll kind of go through it. There's several of these, and they seem to be very, very evenly divided among 6 different areas. One is internally human resource management. There's 1, 5, and 6 seem to cover that for me. Second is internal operations, 7, 15, and 17. So that's the water meters, police department, and central purchasing. And then internal financial management, which would be 4 stabilization funds and 14 fiscal management. And then we have things that are very much directed external to town hall. Some of them are economic supports of one kind or another. Town infrastructure, number 3. Economic development, number 13. Minority-owned business set-asides, number 16. And then there's a separate field. This one's a little bit maybe broader, but it seems to be external cultural support for the community, which is the beautification, senior housing, and cultural center. The one that sort of stands out is communication, right? That seems to be actually the bridge between the internal and the external. And the reason why I bring all this up is not to drive us off course from coming up with 3 goals. But on the one hand, on the other hand, it might be worth seeing if there's either an area in which we get the greatest benefit, greatest lift from perhaps putting our resources into external economic support, or maybe our greatest lift is internal human resource management. Or maybe maybe it is better to spread it out across a couple of different areas. But because they seem some of these seem so intimately linked, and it's not a large list, it's really 6 different areas. I would like to just sort of reiterate some of the comments from our last meeting, which is, with a strong structure of putting, accountability structure, we could accomplish all of these just by putting, essentially 6 different people into some sort of a role where they are accountable for succeeding in only 3 areas. And there would be other people who, they would have to coordinate with, provide information to, consult with, or who may have some additional responsibilities within that area. But the accountability could be centralized into really just 5 different areas, 6 different areas, in a way that we could accomplish all of these, I think, without it being really overwhelming for anybody. So as I said, I don't want to drive you off topic, but I thought this might be helpful for some to consider.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Cavey. That's a great idea. I just recall our first planning session, the department heads that were sitting at the table with Chief Carroll, and I think McCrisky was there, then they had found a way to group it together as well. So we could, and what their recommendation was to do them all, but itemize them and group them, centralize it is another way of saying it. I think it's a great idea. And what do you think? Want to go down that path? Well, what we can do next is break into you're already in your groups, but have our discussions at our tables and decide how we're going to go about this, how we're going to come up with our top 3 goals. Is it individually by the 17, picking out the 17? Is it by grouping and centralizing it in under certain categories, or something else that hasn't been expressed at this time? So let's take about 20 minutes and do that, and then we'll reconvene for our next items. Thank you. Anything else? Hello, everyone. How are we doing? So it's time for us to start discussing our top 3. Online, I just want to make sure you can still hear us. Mr. McCrisky.
I can hear you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Can you let Kevin know? Thank you very much, Ms. McCrisky. How about you, Dolores? We're just doing a sound check.
Fine. We're doing fine, thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. All right. So what table would like to go first? And we're just going to write it. I'll temporarily pull this. No, it's not. Top 3. I'll put it in green. Green means go. We'll call this table number 1.
You know you can make every comment you want. Here, you can.
No, because you were the scribe.
I listened to Tom last time, and he said that we sat at a table with, there was no women, so I sat at the table with all the women this time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Smartest table.
I just had an observation that at looking at a lot on this list, I feel that us as department heads, like water meters, for example, Phil, I know that that's going to be one of your top priorities, right? Right. So we know if you're operating your department effectively, that if something is under your responsibility, you're going to accomplish it. You're going to make sure it gets accomplished. And then I'm sorry, I have a piece of candy in my mouth.
That's all right.
I was thinking about the 2023 list and all that we accomplished, all of those priorities that you had. A lot of it is, within our responsibility, financial responsibility or whatever your department is. So I'm going back to what you were talking about, Steve, that why can't we accomplish a majority of this? And my priorities might be a little different than somebody else's, So I think within our department, if we work on teamwork and communication and team building and education and being trained and documenting things and beefing up our staff, then it makes us more, we talked a lot about management today. So I just think if we're better managers, maybe we can manage our departments and get more of this done so that we can get all of it done. It was just a thought, because it was hard coming up with the top 3, but go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I just wanted to say that.
Well, and we really didn't come up with a top 3. We actually came up with, Selectman Katie's thing, we came up with 3 things: financial, infrastructure, and economic development. Financial, and we just went through and said, well, what are the, looking at it, financial, that's number 1, number 4, number 6, number 14, and number 17. And then infrastructure.
But not be limited to creating a mandate.
Was that you, Mr. McCrisky?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry?
Were you trying to be recognized? I thought I heard your voice. Okay, thank you.
No. Sorry.
Sorry.
And then infrastructure, we looked at it and we're like, oh, and also on their financials, under 1 policy manual, it's really policies and SOPs. We kind of, it's both. Under infrastructure, it's 2, the beautification, 3, the infrastructure, 7, water meters, 8, beautification, and 15, the police department relocation, because that's part of our infrastructure. Because we do a new police station somewhere, that actually then creates goes back to number 13 for economic development. So they're cascading. Under economic development, we looked at number 9, the senior housing, 13, economic development, 16 being the minority set aside, and 10, the cultural center downtown depot. So we kind of, so 3 goals are how we're going to deal with the financial, the infrastructure, and the economic development.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I'm at the smartest table.
Let's go to table number 2, the table with Pam, Mr. Gito, and Bill. And
Well, we do have a few smart people over here, too. I think everybody here is. So anyway, we think that everything is doable on the list, as others have said. We were kind of looking at it as the water meters was near the top because we think, anything that generates revenue should be something that we're concentrating on. The other thing, we kind of grouped the downtown projects together and included beautification in there. Beautification, taking care of the hole in the ground, the Malcolm Parsons site, looking into the housing aspect potentially at the theater, and then also the depot/community center. We think that we've gotten to a point where we need to accomplish what we can in the downtown, admit what we can't do, and then move on to other areas of the community. And then also, we were talking about the infrastructure. That's something that's always ongoing, always needed, and that's the third area. So in some ways, we kind of correspond with table number 1 with those groupings. Anybody else want to say anything? Nope.
all right. Let's go with table, oh, okay, Fran's table.
All right. Well, I think it's humble if we say we don't say we're the smartest, but everybody's smart. We
started something now.
Exactly, they are smart.
Fran, that's why we're going to get all 20 done.
Exactly, and that was almost our idea, is that there is a grouping of them. So when we were all brainstorming, I was taking notes, and I noticed in our top 3, there were a lot of the same words going on. So first we had our policy, and the words we used were transparency, strong foundation, SOP. We were clear, we were transparent. This policy drives everything. Communications, staffing. So there's so many of those items that fell into the policy. Then our second was beautification, and the words that we used in the groups and the numbers that we put in were economic development, morale, safety. As Jack brought up, beautification, safety fell under that. And that's something that obviously when you were driving around and you see these houses and how many people were living at the houses, and that did fall under beautification. And then we talked about housing and community. And then our last one was infrastructure. And of course, this is always ongoing. And they don't know that I put this in, but it has a lot to do with purchasing and procurement. And that drives, the financial part of it. And that's the smartest one. And of course, the parking. And how it involves so many of the departments. So those were our top 3.
What were the 3? You said policy?
Policy, beautification, and infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Okay. And just to recap, Mr. Cavey, we're at your table now anyway, but can you restate those categories that you had before we went on break?
Sure. So we had split off during this table, which is a relatively small one, but the categories that I described were, this start by focusing either internally or externally. The first was internal, which human resources or human resource management. Next is internal operations. Third was internal financial management. Fourth was external economic support. The fifth was external cultural support. And the sixth bridges that gap, and that is communications. Just after listening to everyone's comments, the only comment I would just kind of like to just put out there for people to consider is that I did start by saying there's no reason why we can't do them all, but it's also worth considering whether or not there's any bottlenecks related to trying to do them all. And the only one that comes to mind is that nearly all of these will require a commitment, a relatively significant commitment from our accounting department. Maybe it's the programs we have will make that less of a lift, but I imagine that having all these projects without having necessarily independent bookkeeping and project management will rely heavily on that department. Whereas I don't think that you necessarily get as much across the board exposure. So that might become a bottleneck or something worth considering or addressing at some point on the one hand. On the other hand, I could simply be wrong. Maybe it's not a bottleneck.
So for your table, what did you said that your
so
table
we'd split off to different areas, yeah.
Okay. Well, did anyone else at this table have any other contribution, like Mr. McGee or Mrs. Walsh? Have anything else? Nothing else? Oh, you were at that table. Oh, okay. Mrs. Walsh, did you want to say a few words?
Well, the only department I was ever the head of was a 5th grade classroom. But I hope that's not me.
No, I don't know what that is.
It appears that people seem to be in some agreement. All I can think of is money, money, planning, or planning and then money, money. And you've got that with, it's couched in terms like economic development and financial, but in order to achieve most of these goals, it's going to involve money.
So, I guess in summary, are we saying that it's a unanimous decision that we should do all and just group them together to make sure it's we can accomplish it? So no matter what you call it, tomato, tomato, we can accomplish it. But what are our challenges? Vice Chair Cavey mentioned one challenge, which is significant effort by the finance department. What are some of the other challenges for our goals? So now we have our top goals. We originally said it was going to be the top 3, but we found a way to group and categorize our 17. So we're going to do all. But what are our challenges? Finance is one. Yes, Mr. McGee.
So I think when we say things like infrastructure, that's obviously not going to be done in one fiscal year. So, I mean, that's many, many steps, many, many things. And, I think that the town manager has some ideas about, where to prioritize. When you talk about infrastructure, we're talking about water and sewer. That's one aspect of it. We are throwing out a bunch of things and calling it infrastructure. But one of the challenges is to prioritize and make a plan and how you get to, a better infrastructure. It's not all going to happen in one year.
Yes.
I think a key challenge is going to be widespread communication. And let me explain that using just 2 examples. Money, money, money is the right issue there. Everything costs a lot of money. There are things we can do to make money, and there are things, significant things we can do to save money. But to be able to communicate those things, the value of doing those things, and to bring about the right change from the way we've usually done it in the past is going to be very difficult. It's a major challenge. Stoughton, its residents are very, very committed to the way they've always done things, and I respect that. But in order to save money and make money, it may require doing things a bit differently. And it's a constant challenge trying to effectively communicate that. Let me give you an example. Stoughton wants to build a new school. I think there's widespread support for that. If we don't build our reserves and stop using free cash in our operating budget, our bond rating is at risk of going down. Therefore, our interest rates are at risk of going up. Therefore, that school may become unaffordable. So there are many touch points to every decision. And therefore, all of those decisions require a tremendous commitment to communication and understanding of how they're all related together. Second example, we've got major opportunities for businesses that can pay huge taxes for coming to this town. But we've got a 100-year-old, sometimes 130-year-old infrastructure. So if we don't invest in the infrastructure, we have no right thinking we're going to get economic development. They're intrinsically tied, so tied. There are other examples that go on and on and on. There's something as simple as meters. Meters will save man-hours. Meters will increase revenues. Meters will reduce the amount of water we use because we find leaks real time. Yet we can't get meters through the Finance Committee. Therefore, we can't get it to town meeting floor. But yet it's one of the many initiatives we can take that will produce revenue and save money, save expense. That's what we need to be able to invest in our infrastructure and our beautification and everything else. So the common denominator is communication and consensus. That's a challenge. We need to effectively communicate and build consensus on some of the things we're proposing to do differently than the way it's always been done in the past, in order to be able to support the many initiatives that we're talking about doing. Now, what nobody's talking about in this room, and I'm surprised it's not in the top 1 or 2, is retaining, recruiting employees. The market has gone crazy. It's exploded. And we have not been able to recruit people at what we're offering to pay people. So we have got to find ways to make money and save money so that we can raise money to pay employees. And there was one table that was their top priority last week. It didn't even make the list today. It's a major issue for D&I as we negotiate contracts. People, police and fire, are leaving civil service. So our people can leave and go almost anywhere they want. We're 12 down in police officers right now, 12 out of 60. That's 20%. Our ability to serve is declining, and we've got 2 more going out next week. That'll be 14. And we've got a civil service list of 20 deep, but none of them that are qualified enough to work for Stoughton PD. And we wouldn't want to hire them if they're not. We got 1 out of that long list. So we've got some major challenges in police and fire because we're not competitive with other towns. And as you know by now, I'm not a big spender. But if we don't address that issue, how much lower can the PD staff go before we have a crisis in our town? So we have to talk about those types of competitor issues. We haven't had an employee in over a year except the range that we offered, that we posted. Because our union rates are lower than union rates in other towns. So they go to the other towns. So all of these things are inextricably, what's the word? Inextricably tied to each other. And so I say the communication and education and awareness is key to moving the town forward. I think it's a major issue. And like Steve did with other issues, you can put a half a dozen categories under there that remind us that we have to communicate very effectively in order to get the support on some of the things that we're doing differently than in years past.
Touche, great summary.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
We had a department head meeting today, and I'm surprised that Tom didn't say this word, but cultural challenge. So I feel like even operationally inside, we might have cultural issues that we have to deal with that are challenging, but I think as a whole community, I think cultural issues might be a challenge. And even if it's just trying to change the way we've always done it, just because we want to kind of drive a little forward and make it more effective and still remain our cultural Stoughton, you know? We don't want to change what Stoughton is, but we want to change some of it to make it better without changing the facade or the way people feel about it or making it a different community. So I think keeping that cultural, rich feel while changing the we've always done it that way view and combining both would be something I think is going to be a challenge.
Could we expand on that a bit?
Yes.
Thank you, Trish, that summary. I love what Trish just said, to keep our town cultural core values, but change the things internally that municipalities sometimes protect. Like poor performers. The training staff got today was on progressive discipline for people that are not performing. You know, you may find it, the board may find it shocking to know that we have employees that don't work. They don't come to work on time. They don't work when they're here, but they work for the government. And that's the attitude. And we're changing that attitude to remove people who don't give our residents the return on investment they deserve. Just 8 hours of good, honest work. And we got an excellent presentation today, a training session, on how to deal with those people who have survived without doing their jobs. And I don't mean just not doing them on an average level. I'm talking about not doing them at all. And this staff, the senior staff, the department heads are committed to changing that. That's very rare for a municipality to commit to changing that. In municipalities, it's typically go along to get along. The citizens of Stoughton, the staff agreed today, deserve better than that. And so there's going to be a significant emphasis on the quality of work each and every one of us do. And if it's not of sufficient quality, then those people must work in a traditional municipality, not this one. And that's what we were talking about today in terms of changing the culture. Anyone else who was in that training want to comment on that? Because it was a major breakthrough today and a major commitment among all department heads to have a team that everyone in the town and everybody paying our salaries will be very proud of. I know that's surprising to say. There are people here not doing their jobs. I don't mean in this room. These are the best of the best. But it's a shocker and among all of us, and we're committed to changing that. But again, that requires incredible communication internally and teaching everyone, not me, but a professional who's trained in this, the skill sets needed to help everybody improve their performance. Not to get rid of them, but to help them be successful.
Ah, damn. Ooh.
But at the end of the day,
You said my words.
if they can't improve and then if they can't grow, they can't work in Stoughton. Does that sound too harsh?
Not at all. I was actually going to say those last words. I didn't realize my mic was hot, but it wasn't that. It wasn't that he was. I was going to clarify. Tom speaks very, very well, but I thought he was going to leave that part out. That it's not just about getting rid of those people. It's learning how to train them and how to connect with them in order to make them responsible. And I could see ways to implement it right away. And if it needs to go to that last level, then it does. But know where the fault is and learn how to train them.
All right. Communication.
Cultural change.
Okay, let's spend the last few minutes of our time together to how can the select board support the implementation of our goals? The 17, however you slice and dice it into different categories. What can we do? So how can we help?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm not saying this because for any other reason other than it's true. I had the pleasure of representing 6 towns and worked with 6 select boards when I was a member of the legislature. I think this select board is doing more than any board I've ever worked with. You give us support when we ask for it. You give us freedom when we need it. You give emotional support to every worker you have access, you and the board have access to this. I'm only saying it because it's true. It's one of the finest boards I've had the privilege of working with. So, maybe the staff has got recommendations for where we could use help, but I know I have no complaints at all.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, did that sound like...
Any comments? I just, over a period of time, I've been taking notes, and from time to time I reflect on, and like Lou Gito on the select board, he drives the issue of beautification. Like Scott Carrera, he evaluated the DPW's assets. Like Steve Cavey, he made it a town priority to create affordable senior housing. Like Joe McCrisky, initiated...
To almost reinforce what Mr. Cavey and Mr. McCrisky said, I think going through it myself with the fire station is vital to have the support of the select board. One, it keeps me focused and on point and accountable, which personally I need. But it also, to be that liaison to the public or to town meeting, it speaks volumes when the select board is either in at a meeting or stepping up to speak on a matter or even to counter some of the misinformation. It does a lot more sometimes than myself saying something, putting out a letter, or so I think that if there's anything that you do is continue what you are doing. It's really easy to criticize, and it's really tough to actually build and grow. Change is difficult, but it's a necessity to survive. And so having the backing of the select board, again, I know it's helped us in the working group. It really has. And Mr. Cavey brought up 5 points. There's 5 select board members. I mean, do we build teams within the group here and assign a select board member to each one of those? And it almost holds us on point to, and this is more of the how do we do it, and maybe rather than the philosophy of, you know, just kind of the rah-rah cheerleader behind you, but it holds, you know, it's a point of contact. I think it actually matches up great. There's 5 points. I think you get some talented, very talented people. You have a really smart table over there. So I think that, I'm kidding, Trish. But I think maybe that's the start of building this and tackling each one of those. And again, maybe the infrastructure will take years, but it's got to start. So thank you.
I like that.
Can I chime in?
5 points, 5 select board members.
All right. Tom, when we were talking this morning and you started off the meeting, what was the, talking about honesty this morning.
Transactional honesty.
Transactional honesty, and this is going to be probably a little less than popular, but it's probably more a point of order to show how we can change things and make things, you know, where the changes need to be. So this isn't, since I'm feeling a little bold today anyway, so we have 5 Board of Selectmen. 3 of those I've not had more than 2 minutes of conversation with. 1 person has never spoken to me at all, and then 1 person I've known for a number of years. So how can they help? I don't know. Probably start off with introducing yourself to all of the department heads. I've been here for 9 years. It's not, you know, that's the current board. I mean, I knew a couple of the others too, but granted, Cedar Hill is a very, very small department. It's only 0.187% of the budget here. So I know that that's probably about the attention that I get. Unless we're losing money, I get a lot more attention that way. But now that we're making money, just a point of order, not point of order, but you know what I mean. Just trying to make a point that.
So I just want to say something in that, in response to that, to Victor and to all. If Mr. Gito were not on the Solid Waste Committee, we wouldn't have a solid waste policy right now. But he wouldn't have been on it unless we asked for his help. So I've never asked for help from a member of the board that the board weren't there. So remember, our board members are policy makers. That's their role, that's their job, is to make policies that we follow and comply with for the good of the town. But when a board member has specific skill sets that we need, whether it be Cedar Hill, whether it be the fire department with Joe, whether it be solid waste with Lou, whether it was IT or just general wisdom from Steve and this type of leadership from Deborah and Scott a week ago Saturday, going through every piece of equipment that we have at DPW with me. When asked, they're always there, but we have to pull them in. Otherwise, they are working very hard as unpaid volunteers to make policy for our town. And that, would you agree, Deborah? That's the full-time job. But
I don't disagree with the fact that you'd be there if I asked.
Right.
I have not asked for anything other than my direct supervisor, and he's always been there. The past has always been there as well. So I was just talking about as far as the team building, and I know that there are certain departments that have certainly require, like this fire department situation, the water meters, the IT department. They're very, very big departments. The police department, they occupy a lot of time. I get it. And I do understand that you are volunteers. And I was just pointing out a fact that if you take 4 of the 5 board members, I don't have 2 minutes of conversation with in how many years? That's all. So, not that I don't want to get to know you, it's just no one's ever approached me. Just a point.
Madam Chair, over
Yes,
there.
Bill. Oh, and Bill and then Mr. Gito. I didn't see Mr. Gito saying.
As to ways the board may be able to help, The word consultant has been a dirty word for some departments. Like, for example, and I'm not going to trivialize it, the engineering department. We've got 3 professional engineers on staff, but yet we have articles for drainage design. We have articles for traffic design. I wanted to decentralize the cash receipts to improve accountability and cut down the lag in revenue reporting. I had a $75,000 article prepared, did not make the cut. The decision was made that staff would do it themselves. Well, you know, Mary Jane and I have never seen a 35-hour week here, which is supposed to be nominal. But yet we're trying to squeeze in a policy manual in this fiscal year. So all I'm asking is, you know, if we make the case that we need a professional help, outside professional help, that you give it due consideration, that's all.
Mr. Gito.
Thank you. To the town manager, thank you very much for overblowing my my usefulness on the trash group.
On the contrary.
And the water sewer thing. The staff did the work. I did not. I sort of introduced a little bit of humor into the arrangement and maybe a word or two. So I don't want in any way for the comments that you made to detract from all the work that your staff did, and I know you didn't mean it in that fashion. The other thing that I would say is that I agree with the previous speaker. I had suggested when you first came on that you put money into your account to be able to look closely at various things that needed to be done. I believe that that is an essential piece of the town budget. There are things that need to be studied and reports presented that either have to be paid for or you need to use your authority as town manager to enlist people in the town or from other places to provide information to you. Your staff, in my opinion, is very good. I think that they are stressed a lot. They have a lot of things to do. Managing people and managing projects takes a lot of time. And to do the kinds of work that was done for the solid waste issue, for the water sewer issue, took a lot of time to do in a short period of time. There should be staff in an organization that probably commands about 50% of the entire budget of the town. Basically a $50 or $55 million operation. To have the ability to look carefully and deeply into different projects, different ideas that you have, things that you want to change. There are people in the town that can help. There are consulting firms that can help you as well. It's very difficult to get people that have a full day's job managing departments to do that in addition. We need to have that kind of information to be able to bring to the people of the town in order to get them to support the things that need to be done. I had recommended to you also that we look at the work that was done by the Baker-Polito administration in terms of the community grants that were given to look at new ways of doing business. We should be looking at those things, finding out what worked well, and how we can incorporate some of those things into our own work. And you can use consultants and people in the town to help go through those things. It's very important that that happen, because the people here are all wonderful. They really are. We have a great staff of people. And we need to be able to give them the resources to do the things to make their programs even better. We have the ability to get help from the state to do certain things as well. And we need to work hard to do that. We need to come up with a list of things that we want to get answers to, and then task those things out and get them done. That's the way to move an organization ahead. You know that. You've done that. So I support strongly what the previous speaker said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gito. Are there any other comments? And if not, we'll wrap this up. Okay. So we identified our goals for the fiscal year and the upcoming fiscal year, our challenges, and how the select board members can help. So if there's no further items for discussion, I can bring this to a close. A motion to adjourn from this meeting, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I guess? Because Mr. McCrisky is online, we'll have to do a roll call vote. So motion on the table to adjourn. It's been seconded. Mr. Gito, to adjourn. Vice Chair Cavey?
Yes.
Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Good night, everyone. This has been a healthy, informative discussion, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, all.